We begin with Jimmy Kimmel. So Jimmy Kimmel trotted out his child again last night, and I hate this more than I can tell you when people do this. Okay, I can safely say, because it has been scientifically verified, that I have the two cutest children on planet Earth. In fact, I have a child of 3.5 years, a girl of 3.5 years old, who is so cute that last night she actually started doing lines from the room. And no, I'm not kidding. She is amazing. But she also happened to have a heart condition. She had an open heart surgery that was performed at the same hospital by the same doctor as Jimmy Kimmel's son. And yet I do not routinely trot out my daughter's story whenever I talk about healthcare. When I'm talking about Obamacare policy, I don't say, and I know about this because my daughter had her chest cut open because they had to fix an ASD, a hole in her heart. I don't do that because it's stupid. I don't do that because I don't think that there's virtue in victimhood. I don't think that just because something bad happened to you in life, that means that now you know more about that thing than anyone else. I think that this reference to personal experience when it comes to policy matters is actually the end of policy, because the reality is it's a very watered down form of identity politics. The reality is that politics is based on the idea that I can talk about ideas and you can talk about ideas because we can sympathize with one another, because we can think what it would be like to walk in one another's shoes without actually having walked in those shoes. If talk about healthcare is restricted to only those who have used the healthcare system, if talk about financial systems is restricted to only those who have worked in the financial system, then pretty quickly we are going to come to the end of politics. We can all have opinions on matters of public policy, specifically because we have the capacity as independent human beings to think about what all of these things mean for us and for others. Right? The way that politics is done is by shaping policy around what we would think it would be like to be another person. We don't actually have to have experienced that thing. Right? You don't have to have actually experienced the Holocaust in order to think the Holocaust was bad. You don't actually have to have experienced homophobia in order to think homophobia is bad. You don't have to have experienced racism in order to think that racism is bad. Right? All of these things we can think about and come to moral conclusions about without actually having personally experienced them. This is one of the reasons why I really dislike what Jimmy Kimmel does whenever he brings out his child to talk about healthcare policy. So here's his unsuspecting kid. His unsuspecting kid had a second surgery last week. I guess he has one more when he's age 6, and then he is done for life. We can hope and pray. So Kimmel brings out his kid to talk about the Children's Health Insurance Program. So Children's Health Insurance Program is basically a supplemental health insurance program for kids who are poor and parents who cannot take care of those kids properly, medically speaking. It was sponsored originally by Orrin Hatch, Republican from Utah, in the Senate in 1997. Republicans have been continuously funding it ever since, so have Democrats. And now there's a bit of a holdup in terms of final funding for the CHIP program. But that is not because Republicans are uncaring or unfeeling. Yet that is what Kimmel says. So Kimmel brings out his kid to talk about CHIP. What does his kid have to do with CHIP? The answer is nothing. His kid has nothing to do with CHIP. Right? His kid is not on CHIP. Right? The fact is that Jimmy Kimmel is a very, very wealthy man. He has health insurance, I am sure, through ABC. But Jimmy Kimmel brings out his child and he starts talking about CHIP because for some reason the experience of his child connects with CHIP in some way. Like, you don't have to show me a sick child in order for you to make the case for CHIP, whether it's good public policy or bad public policy, but that's just what Jimmy Kimmel does. So here is Jimmy Kimmel jumping right in and talking about why his son's surgery links up to healthcare policy for poor people who are not him or something.
CHIP is the Children's Health Insurance Program. It covers around 9 million American kids whose parents make too much money to qualify for Medicaid but don't have access to coverage, affordable coverage to their jobs, which means it almost certainly covers children you know. About 1 in 8 children are covered only by CHIP, and it's not controversial. It's not a partisan thing. In fact, the last time funding for CHIP was authorized was in 2015. It passed with a vote of 392 to 337 in the House and 92 to 8 in the Senate. Overwhelmingly, Democrats and Republicans supported it. Until now. Now CHIP has become a bargaining chip. It's on the back burner while they work out their new tax plans, which means parents of children with cancer and diabetes and heart problems are about to get letters saying their coverage could be cut off next month. Merry Christmas, right?
Oh, those evil Republicans, Merry Christmas. And then he goes on and he talks about how tax cuts are the real problem with this. Right? He says they let this money expire while they work on getting tax cut for their millionaire and billionaire donors. So this is the shtick that Jimmy Kimmel is pushing right now. By the way, the so-called tax cuts for the millionaire and billionaire donors, okay, we talked yesterday about how the Senate botched the bill. If you make over $615,000 and you're self-employed and you have like a kid, there's a good shot you're actually going to pay more in taxes than you will make in money above a certain amount of money if you live in a high-tax state like California or New Jersey. But Jimmy Kimmel doesn't know what he's talking about. And this is the problem, right? Everyone is sitting here, and the visuals matter. So you're sitting here, and you are watching his very cute child. And that is a very cute child, right? It's an adorable kid. And you feel terrible for that adorable kid. As well you should, right? I know. I've been in this situation. I know what it's like to have an adorable child who's had to be cut open. I get it, okay? But what he is saying is pure nonsense here, okay? What he is saying is not factually correct. Okay, the House passed legislation last month to fund CHIP for 5 more years. Democrats opposed it. Democrats opposed it on the grounds they didn't like its funding mechanism. It passed the House anyway. The Senate Finance Committee passed a version of that bill too. They haven't figured out the offsets for funding it. Why do they need the offsets for funding it? They need the offsets for funding it because in order for them to pass it through the Senate without it being filibustered, you have to show that it's not going to add to the deficit. Okay, so the Senate already is considering pushing it. President Trump last week, signed funding for CHIP that will take it all the way through the end of January 31st, funded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That federal agency has been signing checks to states for the last 2 months. CHIP is not going unfunded. Senator Hatch, again, the original sponsor of the CHIP program, has pushed forward the KIDS Act, reauthorizing CHIP for another 5 years as well. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on Sunday said, quote, "We need to make sure the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is expiring, gets to panel before the end of the year." It's not that people are wasting time on tax cuts. These two issues are completely disconnected. The tax cuts have nothing to do with CHIP. Nothing. But Kimmel's trying to promote a narrative that isn't even true, and he's using his son to do it, which is just yucky. Okay, it's just gross. The fact is, again, tax cuts have nothing. These are two completely separate legislative efforts. And not only are they completely separate legislative efforts, what's hilarious about this is that Kimmel is saying that the Republicans are trying to hold up CHIP because they're trying to help out their millionaire and billionaire friends. They're taking money from kids like Jimmy Kimmel's son, except if Jimmy Kimmel's son were poor, and they're trying to use that money to pay off all of these super wealthy people. You know where the Republicans are trying to get the money to pay for CHIP? You want to know where they're trying to get the money to pay for CHIP, where the offsets are? For high-income earners on Medicare. In other words, they're trying to get it from rich old people. They're trying to take the money from rich old people and make sure that young, sick kids can get it. And Jimmy Kimmel is sitting there ripping on the Republicans for it. Now, again, the point of this is that optics in politics means everything. Optics in politics is the whole shebang. And the fact that he is willing to use his child for optics like this, I find it really distasteful. I think it's bad for the country. I think, again, that it drives us to a place in politics where we can't have conversations with one another. Because if I didn't have a kid who had a condition, would I be able to critique Jimmy Kimmel? Would people pay attention to it? Or if I were just another conservative commentator, if I were Avik Roy, right, who's not even particularly conservative on all things healthcare, let's say I were Avik Roy, and I don't think Avik has had a kid with a condition like this, but let's say that you're a full-on expert in healthcare. This is what you did full-time, right? You worked over at Cato Institute or at Heritage Foundation, and this is what you did full-time, but you don't have a sick kid? We're not going to pay as much attention to you as we do to Jimmy Kimmel because Jimmy Kimmel has a child who's playing with his thumb while he talks. I hate this stuff more than I can tell you. I think it's opportunistic. I think Jimmy Kimmel is doing something morally bad here. I think it is morally bad to use your child's condition as a lever in order to promote your favored policies, especially when your child's condition has nothing to do with those policies. Policy is about what's good for the bulk of the American people. It is not about what sympathy level you can garner by bringing out a cute child or a cute puppy. And to me, this argument is no different than if Nancy Pelosi would start stumping for Obamacare and she'd bring out a cute puppy and stroke it while she was talking, and then every so often reference the puppy. Right? Again, not because puppies and children are the same. I'm virulently against this notion, right? Whenever people say that they have a dog and it's their four-legged child, I just want to kind of kick them in the ass. But what is particularly ridiculous about this is, again, the notion that Jimmy Kimmel, what he's saying is factually wrong, but somehow it's given added credibility. And if you look at the headlines today about Jimmy Kimmel, I'm going to tell you what some of the headlines say, right, on various outlets. So, USA Today, joined by his son Billy, an emotional Jimmy Kimmel makes the case for CHIP. TV Line, Jimmy Kimmel brings son to live for CHIP funding plea. Daily Beast, Jimmy Kimmel with son in tow delivers tear-filled plea for health insurance. Jimmy Kimmel and Billy blast Congress for holding CHIP hostage, according to Deadline. Jimmy Kimmel brings out his son to talk about health care. At any point in here, would somebody like to point out the fact that everything Jimmy Kimmel says about this thing is actually not true? Like, would that be useful at any point to actually talk about the facts of the situation? Or are we just going to be bamboozled by the fact that he's bringing out a cute kid? Again, I can bring out cute kids too. I'm not sure it would make the show more visually interesting if I were to have my son and daughter on my knees while I did it. I just don't think that it would add to the political points I'm making very much, and I think it would be a cheap political trick. We have known for years that politicians kissing babies is a cheap political trick. It is no less cheap when a late-night host brings out his own baby.
Or felt mistreated in any way. They have every right to speak up.
And does the election mean that's a settled issue?
You know, that's for the people to decide. I know that he was elected, but, you know, women should always feel comfortable coming forward, and we should all be willing to listen to them.
Okay, well, that obviously doesn't answer the question. And this is the typical take that you've heard about Roy Moore. Once you apply any standard to Roy Moore, do you also have to apply it to Donald Trump? That's going to be the question. Here's the reality. Trump ain't going anywhere, right? Trump's not going to resign because Trump denies all this stuff. And also because even if Trump did this stuff, he's not somebody who's really governed by shame. That's not something that the President of the United States has in ample supply, is a capacity for guilt or shame, to his benefit politically and to his detriment morally in many cases. But one of the things that I think that one of the reasons the Moore thing has become a microcosm is because everybody knows what the next step is. And the next step was always coming, and that was the Democrats deciding to use the club of Roy Moore and turn it against Trump. Again, it's why they made the blood sacrifice of Al Franken and John Conyers, not because they actually care about the women. Now, I'm going to talk about what the media are doing to advance this entire narrative in just a second. But first, I want to say thanks to our sponsors over at USCCA. So we hear lots of stories in the news about somebody breaks into a house and a good guy uses a gun to protect his family, but then he's the one arrested. Well, thanks to our court system, this actually happens a fair bit. And that's exactly what could happen to you if you're not fully prepared. Here's how you can take a simple, rewarding journey to complete firearms and family defense confidence. It's the Complete Firearms and Family Defense Guide from our friends over at the USCCA. It's 100% free. You will learn how to detect attackers before they see you, how to survive a mass shooting, the safest, most dangerous places to sit in a restaurant, how to responsibly own and store a gun, even if you have little kids. I have 2 little kids. It is particularly important to responsibly own and store a gun. A lot more. It's 164 pages. It comes with a complete audiobook. You can listen in your car as well. As soon as the podcast is off, all you have to do is tune over and listen to their complete Firearms and Family Defense Guide from the USCCA. It is 100% free again. For a limited time, you will also get a bonus gun buying checklist. Visit defendmyfamilynow2.com. Defendmyfamilynow2, the digit 2.com right now for 100% free instant access. Defendmyfamilynow2.com. Don't forget the digit 2 at the end. Again, that's defendmyfamilynow2.com. You get free instant access to that 164-page guide that will teach you all you need to know about detecting attackers and surviving mass shootings and how to responsibly own and store a gun and all the rest of these vital pieces of information. Our friends over at USCCA are making gun ownership safer and more worthwhile. Okay, so the media, we get back to the media here because the media are now forwarding this narrative. So you can see, Trump attacks the media because the media attack him. People respond to the media's attacks by legitimizing Roy Moore. Trump legitimizes Roy Moore because of the media attacks. The media take the Roy Moore attack and shift it to Trump, which in a certain perverse way actually justifies Trump's distrust of the media in the first place. That's the cycle of life here, right? The media unfairly attack Trump. Trump attacks the media. People perceive the media as being unfair. The media report, in my opinion, correctly on a bad Republican. Republicans rally to that bad Republican side because they don't trust the media. The media then make a second move by extending the Roy Moore stuff out to President Trump in what I think is a politically driven way, and then the Republicans disown that. And so the spiral continues ever downward. You can see this today. Megyn Kelly had 3 of Donald Trump's accusers on the Today Show today, on Megyn Kelly Today. She brought on Samantha Holvey, Jessica Leeds, and Rachel Crooks. All of them say that at some point they were on the receiving end of behavior from Trump, ranging from forcible kissing to groping. All these women showed up in the middle of the campaign.